Hi, hey there. Before we get started, I'd like to address a thing or two. Yeah, this was supposed to be my Hellbrecht video, and it would have been if there hadn't been an incident involving my clumsy cat in my hand. If you're squeamish around blood, I'd recommend you look away in like 3, 2, 1. So it's not as bad as it could have been, but it still wasn't enjoyable by any stretch of the imagination. If you looked away, you can look now. So due to present circumstances, I decided I would work on some footage I had recorded earlier in the week on a whim. I will apologize for any times I hold the model out of focus, considering I'm still learning how to paint with the camera phone in the way, and I promise we'll see improvement in that department. All in all, it was a good thing that I had that whim, or else I would have had a bad time meeting my goal for a video a week. So without further ado, let's start this video. I went into this project with a goal in mind. Earlier in the day, my roommate and I had been playing Warhammer 40k with the Crusade rules. During the Crusade game, a group of Necron warriors fell under fire from my roommate's Blood Angels. After the shooting phase, only one had survived. This one Necron that had survived was a little special to me. You see, a few years ago when I was getting into the hobby, one of my close friends had some old Necron models that he was no longer using. He decided it would make more sense to give the models to someone who could use them instead of letting them collect dust, and so I was very grateful to receive quite a few Necron models. Included in these Necron he gave me was one vibrantly blue Necron. His girlfriend had painted up this model, and I saw no reason to get rid of the paint job. So while I painted up the rest of the models to match my dynasty, I left this one as it was. So back to the story. This singular Necron warrior was the only survivor from the Blood Angel shooting phase. This would be good if it wasn't now time for the Blood Angel charge phase. My roommate had a dreadnought and 5 assault intercessors within range of the warrior, but just out of range for the overlord. His plan was to charge the warrior, kill it, and pile into the overlord. He rolls and manages to make the charge with both his intercessor and the dreadnought. This warrior miraculously survived the hail of onslaught from the intercessors and the crushing, devastating blows of the dreadnought. After that fight phase, while the warrior still stood, my roommate and I just stared in disbelief until he broke the silence and said, "You're going to give that one a promotion, right?" Without hesitation, I agreed. Now, I know that by and large, Necron warriors do not have any remaining consciousness in the 40k lore, but this is my own custom dynasty that I made using an analog dynasty generator. I've looked into it and I can't find the generator, but if I manage to stumble across it, I'll leave it in this video's description. Using the generator, the most important things I rolled were: the nobles of the dynasty have a lust for gold, treasure, and valuables bordering on the insane. Every Necron tier in this dynasty that underwent and survived biotransference kept enough of its consciousness to be considered an individual. The Pharaon Akekotep was severely damaged between the Great Slumber and the 41st millennium, and he needs to be fully repaired before he awakens. The royal court of the Pharaon serves in his stead, and the dynasty has no desires to return to the flesh. With the foundation in place, the Bedknet dynasty was born, and this day, on the planet Ulatara, in the dominion of the Bedknet dynasty, Tadunu would be given the rank of Royal Warden and the title Protector of the Prehefren. You won't find words like Prehefren in the Necron Codex because I made them up as part of the power structure of my dynasty. I wasn't content with the level of detail GW had provided for the Necron dynasties, so I decided to design my dynasty's power structure myself. If you're interested in knowing more about the Bedknet dynasty, leave your questions in the comments. I'll try to respond to them, and if there's enough interest, I may make an entire video about the Bedknet. So finally to the paint job. I decided to start with a base coat of Chaos Black primer. My initial plan was to start with the Zenithal Highlight, but then I realized after I primed the model black, I didn't actually have any white primer. Just black it would be then. I took a moment to inspect the new Royal Warden model and collect my thoughts on the coming paint job. I wanted to preserve all the major colors of the original model, but I wanted to fit the grimdark aesthetic of the 41st millennium. After a bit of contemplation, I had an idea. I wondered how a lapis lazuli carapace would fit with the royal desires of the Bedknet dynasty. Unfortunately, the results for this rare earth mineral were a little strange. Oh, there we go. I don't know how accurate this is to real lapis lazuli, but I like the combination of gold and blue, so I decided to go with it. Getting to work, I began with the metallics, going back and forth between lead belcher and retributor armor. Stopping partway to add the moot green to the recesses of the chest plate to give it that lovely Necron glow. For those of you who don't know, the Necron glow because they hold the ghosts of the Necronter, which are still highly radioactive. More lead belcher, more retributor armor. I pick out all the bits I want to be metal, but I leave the armor plates alone. Although these parts are metal on most of my models, I was determined to keep the blue inspiration of the original scheme. Starting with Macragge Blue, I began to pick out the armor plates. It's at this point in writing the script that I learned that Ultramar is not, in fact, the home planet of the Ultramarines as I believed. It is instead the feudal government state that the Ultramarines have established in the sector of space they control. In this sector of space, Macragge is the homeworld for the chapter. You learn something new every day, or maybe this is just common knowledge and I'm slow to the party on this one. Anywho, after the Macragge Blue, I start in again with white scar on all the bits that I want to glow, and then follow up with a liberal dry brushing of lead belcher to cover all the metal without filling in the white recesses. Next it was time to break out the Caliban green and begin basing all of the power cables. I had an idea to preserve both the green glow of the hyperphase energy and the pink of the gun. This was no ordinary relic Gauss blaster. This Gauss blaster would be fitted with the metallophagic atomic decoupler. From this point forward, I'll be referring to it as the MAD. Now, the rule for the MAD is a little strange, but the way I interpret it is normally the Gauss energy that the Necron employs strips away the target molecules layer by layer, translated from a solid into its base elements, which disperse into the air as a gaseous discharge. If it was shot at a tank, it would look like it hit the side, there's an explosion of steam, and as the steam clears, there's a multi-inch divot in the side of the tank. As it turns out, the steam that we saw coming off of the tank was actually all the vaporized ion and carbon molecules that used to be the steel armor. Once the MAD is equipped on a Gauss weapon, whatever that Gauss weapon hits will loosen the atomic bonds in the target. This allows the next volley of Gauss shots fired at the target to chew straight through its armor, due to having unusually weak atomic bonds. The energy that the Necrons of the Bedcanet dynasty produce is normally green, but once fed through the MAD, the energy began to glow with a bright pink light. This is abnormal as pink light doesn't actually exist. That's a real fact, by the way. All in all, this is to justify why my Gauss blaster is pink instead of green. Back to talking about the paint job, Caliban green was my go-to base color for the glowing energy, and I would build up from there, using Warpstone Glow as a general highlight, and then a small highlight with Moot Green. For the pink, I started with Voluptuous Pink Contrast Paint, and then followed it up with a highlight of Emperor's Children. After the first highlight, I would add an additional highlight of either Decala Lilac or Fulgrim Pink, depending on the location. After I was done with the gun, it was time to continue on the armor. The gold flecks and the lapis lazuli from earlier were still on my mind, so I got to work painting gold into all the cracks on the armor. While it didn't look bad, it wasn't really what I wanted out of the armor, so I began spackling gold flecks onto it with a crappy Walmart 5-cent synthetic brush, the brush being from a $1.50 pack of 30 brushes. I bought 5 of those packs. I have 150 shitty Walmart brushes. After spackling with the cheap brush, I went back in with my nice brush and began cleaning up all the details. Painting the details means it's time for the lightning round. I did the eyes the same way as I had done the Gauss energy. Warpstone Glow, Moot Green, and a pinprick of Uriel Yellow. Sweet success. The stone and skull were painted Eshin Gray and Screaming Skull respectively. I washed them with Agrax Earth Shade, and this was the only shade I used on the model, which I think worked out pretty well, but I may go back and touch up the gold, either with Null Oil for a dirty machine gold, or Rickland Flesh Shade for a rich warm gold, but for now I'm content with how it looks. I went back with Macragge Blue, which I used to pick out the runes on the armor. After picking them out, I highlighted the runes with Temple Guard Blue, which I also used to dot out the little glowing parts on Tadunu's cape. With all this done, Tadunu was complete. I'm honestly very pleased with how this model turned out. I feel that I managed to keep the colorful aspects of the original model and adapt them into the grimdark color palette of 40k. If it wasn't for this game of Crusade, this model, Tadunu, would have never gotten painted up, probably. I love the model, but oftentimes I find myself waiting for the muse to strike. However, in this case, this game of Crusade inspired me, and it was with that inspiration that I brought this model to life. After Helbrecht is done, I've got another model that I'm planning on working on, one that's been sitting in my to-do list for about 3 years now. May I introduce you to Khans, the Shastep of the Bedknet dynasty. Khans is one of the 3 High Lords I mentioned earlier, who run the Bedknet dynasty in the stead of the Pharaon. Look forward to that video, because I'm going to have fun painting up this bad boy. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. If you think your friends would enjoy it, please share it with them. There's a survey in the description so I get a feeling of what you guys would like in my future videos. Disliking does nothing, so leave a comment instead. If you have any suggestions or just want to ask any questions, leave a comment. I may not respond immediately, but I do read every single comment. I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all have a good week, and I'll see you next Sunday, God willing. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.